Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to Finding Me and the ITV networks. Today with me is a PhD student, Ashraf Kannammul, and we are here at the University of Johannesburg at a seminar which is entitled Women, Religion and Violence. The topic of Ashraf's paper was Islam, Gender and Neoliberal Governmentality, and of course it focuses around the issue of Malala Yousafzai and the awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize to her, but raises many important questions within the context of what is happening in the Indo-Pak subcontinent, and specifically related to Afghanistan and Pakistan. I have very many interesting questions, so I would like to welcome and say Assalamu alaikum, and thank you for sharing this time with me, Ashraf.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thanks for
Ashraf, let's get first into the basics. So you did your master's on Asghar Ali Engineer, and it's the first time that I've heard about him, and you speak about him and his writing of Islamic liberation theory. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Asghar Ali Engineer was an Indian Muslim scholar who born in Madhya Pradesh in 1930s, I can remember it. Then he was actively involved in intercommunal issues in Indian subcontinent, social justice issues, and also Islamic reforms and so on. And maybe he's one of the after the Iranian Revolution, he wrote a book, book on Islamic liberation theology. That became maybe one of the first book that addressed the question of liberation theology within Islam from a much more theoretical perspective.
Okay, but considering that he speaks about social justice, perhaps the most prevalent issue on the Indo-Pak continent, and maybe even spilling over into Afghanistan, is social justice and gender issues and gender rights. And now Islam certainly advocates for the rights of Muslim women, and we know that Islam came and liberated women, elevated her status. But when you look at Muslim women in these continents and in most of the Muslim majority Arab countries, for example Yemen, and if we look at recently the study that was done in terms of literacy rates, in terms of development, etc., the worst performing countries are all Muslim majority countries. So how does one reconcile with the fact that you have a rich history that speaks about women's rights, you have a religion that has elevated Muslim women, you have individuals who are talking about liberation theory, speaking about social justice issues and gender rights, yet the most poorest performing countries in the world in terms of these particular rights related to women are Muslim majority countries?
Yeah, I'm not a big scholar on gender rights in Muslim majority countries, but for example, there is a problem in speaking about there is a theories in there is some theological approach in Islam. Quran says this, Prophet tradition says this, Islamic history says this, but still how to, for example, in the present context where Muslims as a community, for example, they live in a particular nation state like India or Pakistan or South Africa, for example, my point is like it is not only the states, but how the other kind of structures also
socialize you.
Understand, and how other kind of structures understand Muslim gender issues. For example, one can look at a Muslim minority state. For example, in a Muslim minority state, where if it is an oppressed minority, or if it is a well-connected, if that minority have good relationship states, so their development is depend on their relationship with the state.
Okay.
So that doesn't mean there is textual and historical or theological aspects of in relation to the status of gender in Muslim communities. I'm saying like we also need to consider other structures. Like I'm saying the biggest player in development, especially if you're speaking about development, poverty, and issues of social justice, the biggest player is states. So we must also look at how the states plays around this problem of
has a role.
Muslim identity and especially gender identity. So I'm not denying that there is poor performance and so on, but we must also try to contextualize and try to connect with other structures of power.
And I think that is very important in the discussion that you have on Malala Yousafzai. Can you perhaps tell us, when did the story of Malala Yousafzai begin?
Yeah. Malala Yousafzai is a Pakistani girl. When she was she born in 1997. When she was 11 years old, she started to write a blog in BBC Urdu website, and it was helped by Abdul Hakim Kakar. He's a representative of BBC in that region, and also helped by her father Ziauddin Yousafzai. He was a social activist. In 2000, and also there's a whole lot of, and she in 2009 she started to write the blog, and in that blog she criticized the Taliban in that region for especially not exactly for not providing educational rights, but certain political kind of policies that Taliban adopted. So in 2011, Taliban, and also there's if I give in 2011, in 2012 she got attacked by Taliban.
Yes.
And that is where her international fame really started. So, but larger context is if I come to that context, is that there's a whole lot of, for example, historically, the region was an autonomous region, because the region that Malala came, that the position is that it got an autonomous region. The Pakistan state give complete autonomy.
Right.
But after the Cold War, during the Cold War, there is a lot of attempt to control the region. Especially, there was a whole lot of when the Soviet invasion happened, United States and Pakistan, all the forces against United States helped to militarize the entire region.
Yes.
And also put these people against. Especially, there was an invasion. They actively involved in taking external helps. So that's one big context that we need to be in our mind. But later the relationship between, there was a good relationship, and later after the Cold War the relationship changed. That means when these people are really asked to stop the intervening of the big governments into their autonomous life in that particular region, there started a clash between Pakistan government and Pakistan government and the people in the South region. I see Taliban as one way of representing the voice of the people in that region. Taliban is a social movement that came out from that region. So there are other kind of social forces, social movements are there, but they are not, for example, Jamaat Islami got a
voice, yes.
Voice, the Muslim League got a voice there. But Taliban is one among many voices in that region. But still, and also Taliban is running a lot of charity. Even Taliban is running schools there for example, they run schools for separate men and women, separate school for men and women.
So they do have schools for women.
And
yes.
So during this time, there was a whole lot of clash that started in the mid-90s, and there was a whole lot of incidents that I don't want to go back
so
now.
Far,
But one important move was recently, after 2005, there is a whole lot of attempt from Pakistan government, especially from the side of United States, also to control the region and to curb the Taliban movement.
But why would they want to control or curb the Taliban movement?
Because if you look at the history, this is also another interesting history, because last 150 years, people in the region was divided over. For example, this is a particular community, Pashto community,
right,
that was divided in between Pakistan and Afghanistan.
Okay.
So during, for example, I'm not going to all this history. During the Afghan invasion, Pakistan told them this, like the government, the People's Democratic Party government, that was a pro-Soviet government that is in power in Afghanistan in 1970s, that is going to nationalize the entire community. They are going to destroy Islam. So the people in the Pashto community from both sides of Pakistan, they said like, okay, we will fight for our Islam to remain an autonomous Islamic community in this particular region, and they fought back. They fought against. Yeah. And one kind of, I'm not sure whether it's like what's the aim of PDP, and there was a whole lot of historical debates on what was the real aim of PDP, whether they were against Islam or not. So that's another debate. But still, this community started to fight for Islam. So, and also, from an Afghan perspective, Afghanistan always try to nationalize these people. That's like, your community is not important. The national identity is more important. Okay. But Pakistan used, because Pakistan also a regional interest. Pakistan also want to take the region from this. Pakistan is like, your national identity is the problem. Pakistan is already an Islamic state. So we want to absorb. You come and join with us to this large Islamic state of Pakistan. That's where. So this tension is always in the community. And during this Soviet invasion, Islam was actively used by Pakistani state and of course international powers, and these people also was willingly actively took part what they call the resistance against Soviet invasion. Then
so religion was used as a tool to fight on either side, basically.
Yes. Religion and nationalism, according to the interest of regional powers, it used. And also, people, but after the 90s, of course, the Soviet Union was gone, but this idea of Islam was so central from even before the colonialism. So
we have to go to a break, but when we come back, then we'll pick up on this. But from what I'm getting from your understanding is that basically the Afghani people have always fought to maintain their sovereign right to practice the religion that they have chosen and to believe in a religion that they believe in, and to maintain the culture that they wanted, and they didn't want anybody to impose upon them. And this has been the response always. Okay, so we'll see you after the break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to the second segment of Finding Me in the ITV networks, today with the PhD student Ashraf Kannammul. Now Ashraf, before we went into the break, we were speaking about this historical context of Afghanistan, the fight of the Afghani people to maintain their Islamic identity, and you explained that it was the Pashtun community has been divided, of course, by the British, and I can't think of really any other states, where there's strife and conflict. It seems that the British have always had their finger in there. If you look at the whole of Africa, in the areas that they have divided, separated ethnic tribes, etc., but there's the formation of states, and so we see the same thing happening to the Pashtun community. So some are in Afghanistan, some are in Pakistan. They want to maintain their Islamic identity. They centered around the Swat Valley, and on the one hand, you said that Pakistan was pulling them, saying that we'll establish our Islamic identity, but post-Cold War, Pakistan is not interested in Islamic identity anymore, yet the Afghans still want to maintain this heritage. But what is very interesting about Malala's discussion, or this discussion on Malala, you stated that her father helped her with this blog, and so he helped her to antagonize the Taliban. Why?
Because, as you see, there is a power, even inside the Pashto community, there is a power battle is going on. So Malala's father is of course from this community. So her father is so much allied with the Pakistani states and the Pakistani elites, especially Punjabi, the Punjab, from the Punjab region. So that's where it really antagonized. There is a kind of battle between Taliban and this kind of other kind of forces over the leadership and over the
political ownership
of the community itself. So one must see that Malala's blog in this context also. It's like a region where I'm not sure whether there are. Yes, of course there are Pakistani activists. They say it's like Malala was used by her father in a sense, because it's like an 11-year-old girl. How she came to write about all these big political issues and so on. And one big thing is like Taliban was. I told you before, Taliban was not against education rights.
So you need to clarify that in pure, uncomplicated terms. Do you honestly state that the Taliban was not against education of Muslim women?
Of course, they were not. But they say that, like, for example, if you read a letter to Malala by a Taliban commander,
yes, I did read that.
Adnan Rashid.
Yes.
He clearly stated that, for example, he said that Islamic civilization is not against women's education, but they maintain a separate schools for women.
So the manner in which it's taught, but not that it shouldn't be taught.
Yes.
Okay. And what about Western education? Does the Taliban teach like maths, science, philosophy, English, or do they believe that education is only the study of the Quran?
No, there are schools run by Taliban that give all aspects of education. So it's like, but the problem is there's a gender separation.
That's the only thing.
That's the only thing. And also the bombing of there is another big story, especially if you follow this like Taliban bombed government schools. But why Taliban bombed the government school? Because that's where the Pakistani army used to come and stay. That's the reason why they bombed.
So when you say that they bombed the schools where the Pakistani army stayed, is that when the school kids were in the school or when the... No. So there were no civilians in the school?
No civilians in the school. But this bombing of schools is like put from its
taken from its context.
And circulators like, look, Taliban bombed schools. So, so there is a whole lot of these incidents that is circulated in global media, but without actually looking there.
Okay, so if you consider all this what you're talking about is the propaganda, right? And if you look at the propaganda-led war by the US and the dominant discourse, which creates Malala as a victim of the Taliban, how do you then put this how do you see this in this context, considering that there have been so many countless young Muslim women and young Muslim children who have been the victims of the US and the invasion of Afghanistan, the permanent drone strikes, etc. How does one respond to that?
Yeah, of course. For example, if you look last week, even Britain pulled out their army from Afghanistan. It's 13 years of war. How many? 2.5 million people died in that region, and 75% was women and children. 75%. So
they're not going to get peace prizes.
I don't want to look at the idea of counting with a teaspoon, but still. Yeah, but still, it shows the disparity and the contradiction in the mainstream narrative, and also, for example, from a progressive perspective on Islam and gender discourse, one can say that it's like one can even disagree with Taliban, but still one need to see all these facts in the ground.
So what do you think what is the historical context or the placing of the Taliban? Is the Taliban now a response or a reaction to neo-imperialist and colonial reclaiming of lands that belong to Muslims and a Muslim identity? Is the Taliban this fanatical extremist Muslim organization that hates the West and hates Western values and Western ideas? How would one place the Taliban?
I see Taliban as, of course, it emerged as a response to
interference,
Western interference. For example, recently there is a book published. Its name is Taliban Poetry, and it's published by Hearst, 2013. So it look at these poetries of these militants. So it's not like a kind of homogeneous movement. It's like even the people inside that movement, they had different aspirations. Some of them are responding to colonialism. Some of them are their personal grievances. So it's a much more complex and broader movement. But Yeah, but by and large, one can say it's an. I'm saying it's not a kind of proper anti-colonial movement, but still it's an imperfect, not a better, but still it's responding to a situation of larger neo-colonial.
In your paper, when you addressed it, you spoke about some of the achievements by the Taliban, and you speak specifically about when the Taliban came into power, how they improved the conditions of women, specifically in rural areas, and they reduced the extent of rape, things like that. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. There are. Even during Taliban took power in 1996, for example, but there are studies, for example, Feminism, Taliban and Counterinsurgency by Sabah Mahmood and Charles Ishkin. They clearly states that during that when Taliban was ruling, there was a massive decrease of the rape among rural women in Afghanistan. And it's like, yeah, even though we are critical about many of their gender policies in for example, the gender segregation schools and so on, and also I'm saying it somehow privilege, especially this idea of privileged men over women. So these kind of issues are there, but still one need to see all these facts to speak about Taliban.
Yeah. Now, considering that what you have said, and much of what I understand from here, is that yes, Taliban had certain of their patriarchal values, but they focused on the human dignity also of the woman by preventing such stuff like abuse. But there's been so many counter media propaganda that has come. I don't know if it's propaganda or it's the truth. Where they say that Pakistan Taliban or Taliban Afghanistan, they flog women if they are raped, as if it's the woman's fault that she got raped. How does one understand these kind of issues?
There are, I told you, it's like Taliban is not a kind of a it's
not
like
homogeneous
a movement even. So it's like there are incidents and there are
different groups,
different groups and interpretation of things, and it's like there are things that how it. So one need to see really how, from which context these kind of things are coming. So that's where I cannot say it's like, I say, for example, from a what I say, from a if you look at kind of from a historical perspective on anti-colonial movement in South Asia, I'll not see there is not that their strategy, their vision is not that really helpful to develop something creative to develop a meaningful future. That's my position. But still, I need to also see my position from what come from a dominant narrative on Taliban. So that's where
you have to balance the two. Okay, let's come to the final part, and that is about U.S. foreign policy. And you mentioned that in September 13th, in the Washington Post, Hillary Clinton spoke about making ordinary people as foreign policy tools of the U.S. And this is now specifically in your context in terms of what has been achieved in Malala Yousafzai. Can you explain a little bit more about that very briefly, because we're almost at the end?
Okay. Hillary Clinton recently wrote an article on the shift in U.S. foreign policy in some of the debates that's happening in Washington. So and she was commenting on this new book by Henry Kissinger, and she clearly states that it is not on the level of the states and people. But it is not on the level of state, but on the level of people that we need to focus. That means we are shifting United States foreign policy from as a top-down foreign policy as something that we will take ordinary citizen as you will use ordinary situation and ordinary citizen as a tool for
advancing foreign policy,
for advancing policy, and we will quote unquote improve especially women's rights and child rights in
these countries.
In these countries. So this was so clear. That's like the from where this politics is coming. So
I suppose in conclusion, I would like to comment what you said was what Laura Bush said is that we must improve their world. But from my perspective and from perspective of a Muslim woman, I'd really like to say, who gives you the right to come and say what improvement my world needs, isn't it? And I think this is what we need to raise in the alternate discussion on Muslim women and Muslim women's rights, is that who gives somebody else the right to impose impose upon me and to impose upon my understanding of my religion, and to advocate for me what they think is better for me. If anybody should know better, it should be me, isn't it? Or the Muslim women who are affected by these discussions. But with that, I'd like to say thank you very much for sharing this time with us, and hopefully we'll see you when you conclude with your PhD. Would you like to say anything as a conclusion?
Because many of this, for me, it's like Taliban or even Malala, this entire media campaign. It's one instances where Muslims or any other kind of colonized communities, they really took out how the dominant kind of politics that erase their social experience and project certain isolated experience as the experience of entire community. So we must really start to think how to produce alternative narratives, and also how to think, how to understand media campaign regarding, especially in relation to Muslim right, especially right issues, especially related to Muslim women right issues.
Thank you very much. And with that, I'd like to say that it is very important for us to start the whole process of decolonization. We need to move from post-colonialism to decolonization. With that, fi amanillah, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.